This week on The Watchman, welcome to one of the most beautiful and stunning desert landscapes you will ever see. This is Timna Park, and some 3,300 years ago, during the time of Moses and the Exodus, this place was used by Pharaoh to build up his mighty Egyptian empire. But the opposite happened. A new dynasty was destined to rise up right here in Israel. Elliot Chodoff is back today to bring you the inside story, only right here on The Watchman. Elliot, we are in a place right now that has some of the most stunning landscapes I have ever seen in my life. What is this place, and why are we here?
We're in Timna Park, on the southern end of the Negev. Maybe we should place ourselves. We can see Jordan off to the east, the mountains of Edom, the Jordanian border down at the bottom of that slope.
Edom meaning the Edomites from the Bible.
Yes, from this area to the south. Midian, further to the south, biblical Midian.
Sure.
That valley continues to Eilat, Israel's southernmost city. Back here over the mountains, not too far away, the Egyptian border with Sinai. Remember, we're in that narrow V coming down to the bottom of the southern tip of Israel.
Near the Red Sea.
Near the Red Sea, the Gulf of Eilat, Gulf of Aqaba. And this park is in a valley, and really, aside from the beauty, and just the natural beauty of all of it, I would say the claim to fame of this place, historically, is that there's copper here, copper ore, which was discovered some 5,000 years ago, but really developed and worked by the Egyptians some 3,300 years ago, and we'll be seeing some of the mines.
Yeah, we're going to go into those mines. Yeah. And that was roughly around the period of Pharaoh from the Bible and the time of Moses,
yes,
where Egypt was a real power in this region.
Exactly. It was around the time, give or take a century, of the Exodus. So, yeah, Egypt, a regional power for sure. And they extend out here, and I think it's important to understand, this doesn't become Egypt. It becomes part of Egyptian influence. Gotcha. They establish a massive copper mining industry here to ship back to Egypt. Later on, a few hundred years later, Solomon will work his way down here and do the same. The Egyptians will retreat a little bit further away.
As the Davidic dynasty
rises and pushes them back.
Yeah, and Elliot, you mentioned we're in the Negev. For folks at home, so you know, that means we're in the desert. It's the Negev desert. It's hot. It's about 106 degrees Fahrenheit, but a stark beauty out here.
Yeah, Negev actually means dry. It's not just hot, but you can see.
I can see and feel why.
That's right.
Okay, the Egyptians this is a major source of revenue for them with the copper mining. Then you mentioned the rise of that Davidic dynasty. What comes next here in Timna Park?
Well, Solomon comes and continues. Now, here also, I think important for us to understand, while all this is going on, the Israelites know that there's copper down here because they've learned it. In other words, it's ancient times, but people travel, they're talking, they don't have internet, but there's communication. As the Egyptians withdraw with the defeat of the Philistines, further back, sort of across the desert, so the Solomonic kingdom pushes down into this area, and it begins to exploit the copper ore down here as well.
So this is almost the southernmost point of Solomon's kingdom?
The southernmost point of the influence of the kingdom, I would say.
Okay. So this was definitely a Solomonic sphere of influence under King Solomon. Wow.
Exactly.
And this stretches, as you were saying, pretty far south. We're hours from Jerusalem.
Yes, we're hours from Jerusalem and through the desert. And that's critical to understand, because to extend out here also requires a great deal of power.
Yes, and that dynasty under David and especially under Solomon grew in power and influence across this region.
Right, until the split, of course.
Yeah, of course. Well, we have so much amazing geology here and just natural formations. I see the hand of God here, the amazing beauty, Elliot. But we also have some man-made structures here, ancient man-made structures from some 3,300 years ago that we're going to take a look at right now. And we're talking Egypt a little bit here, right?
Correct.
Lead the way, my friend. So, Elliot, you mentioned that there was a heavy Egyptian presence here.
Yes.
Now, the Egyptians, as we know from the Bible, worshiped many pagan deities.
Yes, they did.
And this was one of their centers of worship for those workers in those copper mines that you mentioned.
That's right, for the workers and for the overseers. They may not have cared much about the workers. But yes, this was actually a combined Egyptian and Midianite temple, but primarily Egyptian. Its core was Egyptian. And the placement here possibly had to do with facing the east, having the sun rise into it. We can see late in the day, it's nicely shaded. The Egyptians had that sense. And up on the cliff above, on the face, is an engraving of the goddess Hathor, with a worshiper presenting her with a present. That was really the holy spot. In other words, they worshipped here, but they worshipped to her picture up there.
Wow. And this is about 3,300 years ago, during the time of the Exodus, or near around that time.
Exactly. We're standing in a place that was being used while the Israelites were slaves in Egypt.
Wow. And it was being used by slaves here and their
Right.
overseers. And you wonder if any Hebrew slaves were brought here, right?
Exactly. I was just going to say we have no record of it, but if they had slaves, and we know that the Israelites were slaves, it's entirely possible that some of them were brought out here.
And they worked these copper mines, which we'll see in a second. Pharaoh was a nasty, nasty man.
Yes, he
and
was.
conquered a lot of territory. So there were slaves, I assume, from all over the region, Africa, the Middle East, coming here.
From this area. That's why I say it with a question mark. It's a possibility.
Right.
There's no evidence one way or the other. Logic would say they probably didn't bring them all the way from Egypt to here. They used more local captives. Keeping in mind also, being a slave, and we know this from Scripture and the way they treated the Hebrew slaves, killing a slave was no big deal as far as they were concerned, whether it was the Egyptian beating the slave that Moses saves in the beginning of Exodus, or just working them to death.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to work someone to death, Elliot, this is the place to do it.
Absolutely.
You're in the middle of a harsh, unforgiving terrain here in the Negev desert. It gets up to 110 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade. Right. So if you want to work someone to death, this is the place to do it. We're sure that happened. And you know, you had this pagan worship going on here, and it's incredibly well preserved as we look at these ancient bowls. And but Pharaoh's gods failed him miserably in his confrontation with the Israelites. Thank God.
Yes, they did. And let's be serious. For millennia, this has been an abandoned place. It's only with the return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel that we can look upon this place and say, you know what? They were here. Okay, so they were. Now it's ours.
And we're back.
Yes, we are.
And Elliot, as you said, this place lay dormant for about 2,000 years until the Jewish people returned. So exciting to be able to walk this land again.
Absolutely. And you know, the Timna Valley is basically a dead end. So abandoned here is in the real sense, because there are parts of it that had some caravans going through, but this is not a natural caravan route. There are other better valleys. So abandoned for real. And we're talking about nothing is going on here.
Desolate. You can hear a pin drop here We're the sound of our voices is the only sound here from miles and miles away.
And it's paradoxically, it's only when the Jewish people return to their homeland that we can actually look at an Egyptian temple from 3,000 plus years ago and say, okay, they were here, but now we're here.
That's right. And right now we're going to go to that Egyptian-run copper mine that you mentioned when things were really buzzing here in the desert some 3,500 years ago. Not in a good way, but it's fascinating. Let's go underground, Elliot, into those mines right now. Don't move. The copper mines coming up. Welcome to Jerusalem. We hope you're enjoying this special two-part Watchman series on the Hamas threat. Folks, as Thanksgiving approaches, we Americans can be very thankful that we don't have terrorists bombarding our homes with rockets, that we don't have to run into bomb shelters with our children at a moment's notice. Sadly, that's exactly the kind of situation the people of southern Israel are dealing with every day. And remember, Hamas doesn't just target Israelis. It has also murdered dozens of American citizens. At Christians United for Israel, we're standing in the gap for the people of Israel. We know that when you defend Israel, you are defending America, and we need your help. To support our work at Christians United for Israel, visit cufi.org/give or call the phone number that you see there on your screen. Now more than ever, Israel needs our help, and if we don't take a stand for God's land, who will? We are in the middle of the desert. This is Timna Park, just north of Elliot, which is the southernmost point of Israel. We're near the Red Sea. We're not that far from Egypt and Jordan. And right now we're in a very unique spot in this desert. Where are we?
We're actually sitting in a copper mine. The origins of the mines here are 5,000 years ago. These mines are only from about 3,300 years ago. And you said we're near Egypt. In those days, this was part of Egyptian influence. It wasn't Egypt proper, but the Egyptians were here. And they found copper ore. Actually, period before that, copper ore was known to be here. The Egyptians, some 3,300 years ago, which glides us into the time of David and Solomon 3,000 years ago, established a mining industry here in which, and interesting enough, and not surprisingly, they understood that it would be better to do the industrial extraction of copper metal here than to bring all the ore to Egypt and do it there. In other words, what they would ship out of here was just the metal.
Yeah, they would take, okay.
Okay. And the way they did it basically was to drop shafts. This is an open one, but you can see circular shafts all around this area till they hit the vein of copper ore that they knew they would find. In other words, it wasn't a random shot. They would hit that line, which is here, and we can actually see some of the remnants of it. And then they would cut horizontal shafts like the ones that we see here to actually mine the ore straight out. They weren't blundering around here on
They were very efficient.
Efficient, they were directed. They know that they're an area of copper. As a matter of fact, here, you don't have to go very far. Here's some copper ore.
Everywhere around us.
It's everywhere around. And what I find particularly interesting, in addition to the mining, which, when you think about it, is an industrial machinery wonder.
Yeah, this is ancient mining.
Where they're doing it by hand.
By the way, who was doing it? Who was actually doing the mining? We know it was Egyptian directed.
Right, well, they were slaves, certainly.
Slave labor, and just so people know, it's, I think, 106 degrees Fahrenheit here today, where we are.
In the shade.
In the shade. Where luckily we have a little bit of a patch of it here in the mines.
Right, and which also tells us that they understood how to work in this kind of heat. Because, because they had slaves, they didn't treat them well and that sort of thing. But you can't have your slave population dying off on you.
I mean, there's the desert, and then there's the desert. Right. This is the desert where we are right now.
We're really in the middle of it.
Yeah.
From a purely human history point of view, we have this error in thought in which we think that we behave as if the ancients were primitive. And I know you've probably had it in conversations. I know that I have people who say that religion is the result of superstition of primitive peoples, and they're trying to explain a world that they don't understand and that sort of thing. Well, I challenge someone to explain to me how over 3,000 years ago, people understood and knew that if you heat this up to a high enough temperature, you will get copper metal out of it. And then how do you actually go about raising the temperature to that level in a furnace in order to do it? And to separate the metal, purify it, and they actually shipped the copper metal ingots from here, leaving the slag, the junk behind.
Wow. Talk about a smart business mind.
That's right.
Among the Egyptians, and industrial.
Yeah. So, of course, this is a major economic resource center for them. Copper is important for them, not just today pennies, right? But it's part of their metalwork. It's part of how they make weapons. They're making bronze out of it. They already know enough metallurgy. They're not further on yet, but they've moved from sticks and stones to using metal in a very sophisticated way. And once again, we're talking about 3,500 years ago.
Yeah, so this was around the time of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, maybe after that, maybe
right.
Moses.
Right. Yeah, in that interregnum.
Yeah. When did the party end for the Egyptians here in Timna and in these copper mines?
Well, Egypt goes into a bit of a recessional decline, if you will. And of course, it matches with the rise of David. Remember that the Philistines are Egyptian proxy front line. They're defeated by Saul ultimately. Well, by David ultimately. They defeated Saul. The defeat of the Philistines is part of a drive pushing the Egyptians back. Now the Jews, or not called Jews yet, but for our purposes,
the Israelites.
They're past Israelites. The Davidic dynasty, the tribes, don't have an interest in conquering Egypt. They're not going back there. So the desert, the Negev and Sinai, become a sort of buffer zone between them. And Solomon comes down here because he starts using this area for the same reason the Egyptians did. And we talk about Solomon's mines here, and Solomon's name appears. And he uses the port of what we call today Eilat to ship out through the Indian Ocean. And here again, interestingly enough, we think that global trade is a mid 15th, 16th century phenomenon. No. It goes back to 2,000 and more years, 3,000 years.
Yeah, so there's an amazing biblical history here. It's a geological wonder, Timna Park. Yes. It's just stunning, the landscape here. And by the way, that breeze that just went past was pretty nice.
It was.
We needed that. Off to the desert. Hopefully there's an oasis. Let's go.
Let's go.
Thanks again to Elliot Chodoff for bringing us the powerful story of Timna. Up next, we're staying in the Negev desert with our good friend Danny the Digger Herman to learn about one of the most mysterious peoples of the ancient Middle East. And we might just get some clues about the origins of the 3 wise men. Folks, you won't want to miss this. Don't move.
Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, ISIS. The same terrorist forces that seek to annihilate Israel have a bullseye on the back of the United States. At Christians United for Israel, we know that Israel's enemies and America's are one and the same. When Israel comes under attack, our nationwide network of over 7 million members leaps into action. We help lead the fights on Capitol Hill to pull out of the disastrous Iran nuclear deal, to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, and to cut funding to the Palestinian Authority over its use of American taxpayer dollars to fund terrorism. When CUFI speaks, Washington listens. And as radical forces threaten Israel and America, we need your help. To support the important work of Christians United for Israel, visit kufi.org/give or call the phone number on your screen. When you defend Israel, you're defending America. So join our movement today.
And welcome back to The Watchman. They were a powerful people during the time of Jesus, and they spent a lot of time in the Negev desert in southern Israel, where we visited this week with Elliot Chodoff. I'm talking about the Nabataeans. Now, despite their wealth and influence, the Nabataeans are never mentioned in the Bible. That's why we asked our good friend Danny the Digger Herman to head to an ancient site in the Negev desert to bring us the inside story of this mysterious people who just might have a link to the three wise men. Danny, take it away.
It is the Gospel of Matthew that gives us the most detailed account of the birth of Jesus. And among others, it records three wise men coming from the east to adorn the newborn. And upon seeing him and his mother, they present unique gifts: gold, myrrh, and frankincense. Who could be those people? As an archaeologist studying this region for many years, the region of the Holy Land and its neighboring cultures, I am of the opinion that it could only be referring to one group of people, the Nabataeans. The Nabataeans were a Semitic group of people who in the time of Jesus had a special economical niche of transporting goods from the southern end of the Arabian Peninsula, as well as Eastern Africa, and even goods from India across the desert and up to the Eastern Mediterranean at the port of Gaza. No one else knew how to carry the loads through this harsh environment. Only the Nabataeans had the knowledge of hidden water reservoirs that could, in a way, refuel their camels and so manage this journey. The goods were of various types, but it is the myrrh, the frankincense, which would be burnt on incense burners like these and produce a very special and pleasant odor that was very popular for both domestic use and rituals. And the last 5 days of the journey would be through the southern area of the Holy Land, through the Negev. This site, Ovdat, was one of them. Ovdat, named after a Nabataean king, would be a major rest place after crossing the Arava, the Ramon crater, and before completing the last stage of the journey, reaching Gaza, where the reward will finally be given to them in a lot of cash. Back then, gold. Ovdat started as a caravanserai in the middle of the Negev, halfway between the Ramon crater and the spring of Ovdat. This hilltop originally was used by the Nabataeans probably for sacrificial activities. This slab of stone seemed to have been used for rituals. The grooves leading into a small basin were perhaps to enable the slaughter of small animals by the Nabataeans to thank their gods, Dushara and El-Uza, for achieving this long journey, at least up to this point. And behind me, the columns, the Nabataean capitals, were all probably part of a Nabataean cultic center. Ovdat continued to be inhabited also in Roman and Byzantine times, and in fact in the Byzantine Christian periods, it developed into a small town with 2 churches. Let's take a look at one of them. This basilica-shaped church, added in the citadel of Ovdat in Byzantine times, demonstrates the impact of Christianity even in the limits of the Roman Empire in the heart of the desert. And yet, although we have a good document of the city center, the residential area of Ovdat, which reflects the daily life here in ancient times, is still waiting to be uncovered by a proper large-scale excavation. Who knows what might be hiding in those caves? Maybe even treasures left by the Nabataeans. Treasures of myrrh, of frankincense, of gold might be waiting here to be uncovered, reflecting on this legendary wealth of the Nabataeans.
Thanks again to Watchman contributor Danny the Digger Herman for bringing us the inside story of the mysterious Nabataeans. Up next, my final thoughts on what all of this means for you. Stick around.
God has appointed watchmen over the people of Israel to pray, to petition on their behalf, and to provide protection wherever possible. Christians United for Israel is committed to fulfilling this God-given mandate. This holiday season, you can join us in this special calling. For your gift of any amount, we'll send you this beautiful Kufi Christmas ornament, handmade in Israel. This one-of-a-kind ornament features the Jaffa Gate, the main entrance of the Old City of Jerusalem, and is inscribed with Isaiah 62's Watchman on the Wall verse. For Zion's sake, we will not keep silent. Displaying this unique Christmas ornament on your tree this holiday season is a reminder of your faithful commitment to bless and defend Israel. Visit kufi.org/gift to receive your custom Kufi Christmas ornament today. Show your friends and family members this Christmas that you stand with Israel as a faithful watchman on the wall.
Welcome back to The Watchman from Jerusalem. Folks, we had a blast bringing you this special series over the past 2 weeks from the Negev desert in southern Israel. Our team at Christians United for Israel loves to bring you these kinds of cutting-edge stories that you just won't see anywhere else. The land of Israel is coming alive today, in real time, before our very eyes, just as the God of Israel promised that it would. The book of Isaiah says that the people of Israel will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. Folks, that's exactly what's happening in this land today. And our team at Christians United for Israel has a front row seat for all of it. We are the world's largest pro-Israel organization with over 7 million members. And for Zion's sake, we will not keep silent. You see the information there on your screen, so call or click and join our movement and become a part of this great Bible story that God is writing in His land today. Thanks for joining us this week here on The Watchman. Until next time, from Jerusalem, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.